Is the system working? I know when I was here earlier in the week, it was quite tricky technically. Welcome everybody to this first meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee in the new municipal year. This is a system working. Okay. Okay. Right. That echo, how one hates hearing one's own voice, is the fact that this is an open meeting, open to the public, and is being recorded and will be of. Is this going to carry on? No. Before I carry on. I'm just waiting for some technical affirmation that I won't be doing this twice and you won't have to listen to me twice. Okay. Well, I'll try and read the papers again. See how that goes. Okay, we'll try now. Am I echoing? No. Good. So, yes, this is an open meeting and is being recorded. We've received apologies from Councillor Harvey, and his substitute Councillor Atkins is on his way. The bus has broken, I understand, but we are quorate, so that is a good thing. And Councillor Bootle, did I pronounce that right? Should be here attending as a substitute for Councillor Corney, so she can get an insight into how we do our business if she ever needs to be with us. Moving on then, it's declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest relevant to this meeting? Not already declared? No, thank you. Okay, I have to read out some words now, which is the next item is the election of the Vice Chair. In the Constitution, Chapter 9, Section 5, it states that the Combined Authority Board shall appoint a Chair and a Vice Chair. At the AGM on the 8th of June, the board appointed myself, John Pye, as chairman of the committee and delegated the decision of a vice chair to the committee to decide at its first meeting of the municipal year. So do I have a nomination for a vice chair? So
I'd like to nominate Graham Wilson.
I'd nominate David Brown.
Right. Okay. Do we have a seconder for Graham Wilson? Is that? Can you second yourself?
I've no idea, John. But
Okay. Okay. And I'm told that Councillor Brown withdraw. I thought I did put out a note to. I wouldn't have been surprised, because we would have avoided me being surprised. So if we've got a seconder, are we all content that Councillor Wilson becomes the Vice Chair? Thank you, carried. Okay, I'd like to welcome, one of the issues that we have is the turnover on the committee, and this year is particularly noticeable that half of us are new, will be new. So I'd like to welcome the new members, Councillor Alley, Councillor Corney, Councillor Harvey in his absence, and Councillor Smith. I'm very grateful to all members that the chopping and changing of dates, because of the nature of the business that we have today, has been has worked well. So thank you for that. I've also, because of the nature of the business today, cleared the agenda of all other items so that we have the time to focus and consider the import of the business we have in front of us today. That means, of course, that it was a relatively light agenda originally planned for today, but it does mean that business has been shunted into our next meeting at the end of July. So be prepared for a slightly longer session. Thank you. I'd like to report that I put in the committee's annual report to the Combined Authority Board earlier in the week. And other than thanks, the other piece of feedback was that an expression of assurance that we should be resourced as we come through this next year if our workload increases. And I think there's expectation in some members of the board that we're going to be very busy. I think we just have to be clear as to what our busyness might be, because we are about the audit and governance arrangements, not how the work is done. And I did invite, and is it in the audience? I did invite the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny to join us today, so she could listen to this debate. And it will be, she and I know that we will need to work in harmony as we go through the next year. And finally, in my announcements, I'd like to say that I had an online meeting yesterday with the new interim chief executive, who is not yet in post. I'm not even sure his name is publicly in the domain, but it was an indicator to me of the importance he felt about us having a conversation before this meeting, and it was very constructive, and it did plant a thought that we need to bear in mind, that we have a new interim chief executive landing shortly next week, I think, is it arriving next week? His name is not known yet. Oh, it's Gordon Mitchell then. I wasn't sure. He didn't know yesterday when I talked to him. And this is the 5th time he will have taken on such a role in local government in organisations which have pressing and challenging circumstances. So it was reassuring to me that he has a full understanding of the sort of issues in local government which can arise and how one might move them forward. And it also put in my mind that we should bear the need for him to take a week or two to take stock, and that we have a meeting at the end of July which will enable him to come and give us an update and advice on where he's got to. So that concludes my announcements. I'd like to move on to item 4, which we might look at as cold toast, but it was the minutes of the last meeting and the action log. For those who were here then, could I have can we accept the minutes as a true record? And are there any comments? So first, it's a true record. We're happy to take the meeting. Okay, so. And are there any comments on the minutes or the actions? Go ahead.
3 things. The top items, the corporate risk register, are we still going to consider that in July, or will the new interim chief executive want to review the corporate risks and potentially delay that? Secondly, similarly with the internal audit progress report, it would be good if we did get an update on what's happening, but I can imagine that might well get delayed as well. And the third item about climate change, I was recently sent a National Audit Office good practice guide on audit and accounts committees or audit and governance committees and climate change. And if you and officers haven't seen that, I'll be delighted to send it through to you. It's quite interesting, but long.
Thank you, Graham. On your first 2 questions, I mean, I would hope that we would have a risk register. and certainly the internal audit will be in the agenda. I'm having a pre-meet with officers and the chief executive and yourself planned. I think it's the 11th of July, and we can discuss those things then. But it is I don't think we're in the business. It doesn't seem to me that we should be in the business of just moving stuff to the side. We just need to get back on to our normal program of work. And even if things are not as well formed as we would like them, it's better to see them than not. And that is the position I take. And thank you. I would be grateful if you'd send me that long piece on, well, and colleagues, the long piece on climate change. Thank you. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Okay. Right, well, we now move on to item 5 regarding the external auditor's letter and the work with London. I can't pronounce these funny ministerial names, and the actions which have been taken since, in fact, I think it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon before the Jubilee holiday that I received my letter from the external auditors. And that's when I, amongst other things, tried to create this breathing space by moving the meetings back, which we've done to allow some progress and to allow the import of the intervention to register where it needed to register. I think before I ask people to introduce, John Alsop is going to introduce the paper. The external auditor, Mark Hodgson, is going to do an introductory statement. Have you agreed? Anyway, we'll get to that point. I attended the meeting of the Combined Authority Board earlier in the week when they took essentially the same paper. There was no constructive discussion about it. One member did mention behaviour, but there wasn't any change in the conduct of business that I've noted hitherto. I think this is, for us, this is the opportunity to have a proper, free-ranging debate, staying out of matters confidential. And I hope that we could reach a point after we've had our discussion where we can have 1 or 2, 3, 4 strategic conclusions if we decide that we want to feed back information. There's a huge amount of detail, but I would encourage us to think that the detail is less important at this juncture than trying to tease out what the strategic issues are and what, if we provide advice, that should be. So with that sort of encouragement, I could ask John to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. If I go through the introduction to the paper, and then perhaps ask Mark Hodgson from EY to make some further comments. So this paper is to provide the committee with an update of the Combined Authority's engagement with DLUC, Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Subsequent to the letter, the Combined Authority's external auditors, EY, wrote to the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, reporting that they had identified a significant weakness in the authority's governance arrangements, that the authority needs to urgently ensure that it has appropriate leadership capacity to be able to deliver its objectives and statutory responsibilities, and that more formal intervention is required and expeditious discussions with the authority's sponsoring department to this end are time critical. So the EY letter is shown at Appendix A to this report and was copied to senior members of staff at the Cities and Local Growth Unit and sets out EY's concerns and the evidence they reviewed in making their judgment on the nature of the significant weakness identified, which focuses on governance, how the authority ensures that it makes informed decisions and properly manages its risks. The chair of the committee, the Audit and Governance Committee, then forwarded this letter to the Mayor, to Combined Authority board members, to members of this committee, and to the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and indicated that he would be postponing the next meeting of this committee to allow initial engagement with DLUC to take place, and recommended that the Mayor also postpone the board's AGM due to take place on the 8th of June for the same reason. The Mayor agreed to postpone the meeting postpone all but the formal business of the AGM. That's the part one parts of that agenda, which essentially dealt with the appointments to committees. And that meeting was then reconvened on 27th of June this week, which included a paper similar to this one, setting out the Combined Authority's initial actions in response to the EY letter. Officers have now met with DLUC officials who drew officers' attention to their guidance on addressing cultural and governance failings in local authorities. These notes set out 6 indicators of poor culture and weak governance, which are listed under paragraph 2.7 to this report, and also in Appendix B, which also sets out a range of possible interventions. Appendix C provides an extract from the extraordinary board meeting, providing a suggested format template for a locally led improvement board, which was considered by the Combined Authority board earlier this week, and who agreed that this should be taken forward in future discussions with DLUC. The committee is asked, therefore, to consider the external auditor's letter of the 1st of June and the update provided in this paper, to discuss any potential further improvement actions in the light of the issues identified, and to consider whether to make a recommendation to the Combined Authority board on a future improvement activity. So at that point, I'd like to invite Mark Hodgson, if you will, to statements on behalf of the EY. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good morning. So firstly, just introduce Jacob McHugh to my right, who's our manager on the engagement for you. I thought I'd say a few words because we recognise that a few of you around the table are new to this committee, and it may be worth giving some background of how we got to the point where we issued the letter for you. So our role as external audit, as required by National Audit Office's auditor guidance notes, is to set out any risks of significant weakness in the authority's value for money arrangements as and when they manifest themselves or become known to us as external auditors. And this is a recent change in that guidance to ensure that the authority can both see the view of the auditor, but also be in a position to take timely, appropriate action to remediate that issue. Whilst we have sufficient audit information to understand the current position, the issues and the potential impact that they could have for the authority, clearly we do not have a full fact pattern to be able to conclude our audit work at this point. But it is clear to us that there are significant weaknesses present. Some of this audit information and further evidence will come following the internal investigations that are currently underway, and we do not want to prejudice those investigations or any other investigations that are required. We didn't take the action to issue our letter lightly. It was after a considered thought process about what the information and the explanations available to us at the time meant for our assessment of whether a risk of significant weakness in arrangements existed or not. When I consider the authority and the issues that are set out in the letter and compare them to what I have seen throughout my career as an audit partner and other bodies that I have audited in that period, it clearly does give me rise for significant concerns. By issuing the letter at the point in time that we did, It provides the authority with an opportunity to act. As I see it, the authority has a number of options. Well, two. One, the authority can look at the issue and come back to me and say all is fine. Or the authority can look at the issue and come back and say all is not fine. We are going to do X, Y, and Z. If the answer is the former, I think we would have to do a significant amount of further work because we would need to determine how pervasive the issues were. In the latter case, we can assess the authority's arrangements and plans to address our concerns and what that means for our ongoing audit reporting and statutory responsibilities. So my action from here is based on the response of the authority. We also supplied a copy of the letter to the authority's sponsoring department, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, to ensure that they had the visibility they need of the issues that we highlight. They may also be in a position to support the authority in addressing those issues through the routes that they have available to them. The letter does clearly set out some key concerns. Our letter is very clear on the issues which have all been recognised by officers and I think leading members of the authority. We will not comment further at this stage against the observations within the letter and how we drew our conclusions, as that may divert attention from addressing the issues at hand. But clearly happy to have a dialogue this morning and answer questions about the approach and other parts of the letter.
Thank you very much. How we unpack this, let's see how the initial comments go and see if I can try and keep us on a logical path of discussion, but I open the floor to colleagues. Comments? Graham.
Can I ask Mark, particularly in his comment about the authority can either say that there's nothing here, or it can take some actions and EY will then assess those actions, whether EY have already assessed the proposals that the combined authority are intending to take or have taken and are intending to take, and whether he believes that those address all of the comments which he has identified. Because in my view, many of the things which he has written in here about his concerns are not addressed by actions which the authority is proposing. So I'd be interested in whether Mark is happy with what is being proposed or not.
Before I ask Mark to, but I'll leave Mark to sort of tutor us on where he thinks he can be, bearing in mind he's still working towards his final opinion in the audit. I just want to make sure we give him as much cover as we can if our questions are too difficult, and he'll tell us why they're too difficult.
Thank you, Graham. I don't think we've had sufficient time to give due attention to the reports that are before you this morning, but clearly they are part of what I would say is a journey, as opposed to getting you to the end in one vehicle. I think there are going to be more than one vehicle on that journey that you need to deploy, but clearly it's going in the right direction. But I wouldn't say it is a full, comprehensive response to all of the issues at this point in time.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess that's working. My reading of the report and the letter, as far as I can see, or what I'd like to know really, is EY's letter identified 3 particular actions: ensuring safeguarding of authority staff being of paramount importance, ensuring sufficient appropriate leadership capacity, and then the bit about more formal intervention. From what I read in front of us, the 3rd point seems to be addressed, as in more formal intervention. But I'd like to know what action has already been taken or is being taken on ensuring safeguarding of authority staff and putting in sufficient appropriate leadership capacity.
Thank you. John, are you able to answer those 2 points?
Thank you. I think just to before we get too much into the detail, it might be useful just to recognise that if we do stray too much. I'll be looking for the monitoring officer to say that, that we need to not go in that direction. And I think in the previous guidance, we just need to be mindful that we may need to go into exempt session if it does stray into territory that perhaps we shouldn't be discussing in public. But yeah, so as you be aware, there's been a significant amount of work and activity to address a whistleblowing complaint, which has involved an independent investigator. Obviously, there are significant amounts of safeguarding concerns associated with that. Obviously, we can't just go into the detail of that. And then there is also a secondary or another code of conduct investigation, which is ongoing at the moment. So, yes, we are acutely aware that that is the top priority to ensure that that members of staff are protected, and those are ongoing. And we have the Assistant Director of HR has been working tirelessly in that regard, along with monitoring officers, and we've had a great deal of support from legal advisors and others to make sure that that people are protected. With regards, sorry.
Shall we just stop?
Yeah.
Draw a line there. I mean, does that answer that part of the question for you? Because I very much prefer that we found a way forward without having to go into private session if we possibly can.
I agree entirely, Chairman. We need to do as much of this in public, and I don't want confidential information. That's not what I'm asking for. It just struck me that the paper didn't give me any indication that that work is being done. John's answered that it is being done, but I couldn't see it in the paper.
Thank you. The other point.
Yeah, so in terms of leadership capacity, yes, we are. There is obviously some gaps at in the leadership of the organisation, as was mentioned earlier on. Today, we now have an interim chief executive, Gordon Mitchell, who has had a huge amount of experience in local authorities with difficulties in the past, and I understand that he will be joining the combined authority from Monday. We're also in the process of looking to support the monitoring officer role with an interim in that area, and also, as you may be aware, as part of the work that the previous chief executive Eileen Milner was leading on, was an even better transformation program, which was looking at the establishment structure of the organisation, and that will, once the new chief executive is properly in post, the idea is to continue with that, to look at the ongoing structure of the organisation and to deal with the other vacancies at directorate and tier 2 and tier 3 level. Thank you.
Before I ask for the next comment, we will need to, as a committee, take a thought in due course as to how we missed some of this. There was the confidential issues, but there's also capacity issues. And I have picked up in debate that staffing levels are not as strong as they should be in various areas. Yet we've never had any concerns expressed or any data. I don't know whether you wanted to make a comment now, or this should be something that we look at in when this dust of today is settled. But I have been, as chair, saying, well, had we as a committee missed something, or has there been a coyness about sharing with the audit governance the staffing challenges that you've been facing?
I think this does appear as a risk in our risk register, which would have been coming to the originally scheduled meeting. But as members will be aware, we currently the recent departures have been the Director of Business and Skills, Director of Corporate Resources, and one or two other officers at Tier 3 have left recently. So yes, obviously conscious that that there are some significant gaps, obviously with Eileen's departure as well, and that has caused some concern, which obviously has been highlighted in the EY report. There was always, since Eileen joined, the intention to review the structure of the organisation, and that was a part of the transformation programme. But because of other things that were going on in the organisation, that hasn't progressed as quickly as it was originally envisaged. So we have been aware of it for a while, and it will be put back on track as soon as we can.
Thank you, John. I think Graham Wilson's got something on this point before we move on to.
Yes, I share your concerns, John, that I don't think audit and governance have been kept informed as I would have expected us to be. In the County Council, when there were issues about Manor Farm, Girton, and the bullying and harassment that former councillor Roger Hickford undertook, that was an issue which came to Audit and Accounts. Audit and Accounts appointed external consultants to look into it and had regular meetings specifically to cover that issue. I know some of the points that are slightly different in the authority, but it says at the top of page 3 of the EY account that the board has considered and agreed a settlement package for the current chief executive. Well, that in itself is so significant that I would have expected us to be told what and why. And then the second one is there is the potential for further employment-related risks against the authority, which pose a significant financial risk. And again, I would have expected us to have been told about these, not to have to try and pick it up from a risk register or something else.
I should perhaps clarify that there's two issues here. What is the confidential nature of the employment activity that's been going on? And at every meeting, when I became aware of this, prior to every meeting, I pressed the monitoring officer to be able to share this, and I've been advised that it was inappropriate because of the nature of the issues. And the first time we really saw it was mentioned within the formal setting of the meeting was at our last meeting in March. And again, there was no detail. So, but I have been assured that at the right time, all of this will be briefed to us. And I think that's what we said in March, but I don't know when the right time will be, because I'm advised that some of the follow-on work could take some months. So that was one side of the coin. The other side of the coin was the capacity strain. And I don't want to labour it anymore now, unless members do. I just think that we will need later a session to try and understand how we can learn from what has happened, both officers and the committee. Are you happy to leave that bit there? Thank you. Now, other comments? Imtiaz, can I do?
Thank you, Chair. I think I kind of agree with what you're saying in that we have to come back to this later and maybe address some of these issues. But at the same time, I think certainly the experience I've had with my own local authority and also just in my professional life, an external auditor giving you news is not normal. And I'm sure, Mark, you'll agree, like the number of instances where an external auditor gives you news about your organization that you had no inkling of, and it was a complete shock, is quite a rare thing. I think there's different levels of risk and governance, from pretty much the day-to-day people at the coalface versus their subordinates and their directors, and then an internal audit function, and then an external audit function, and all these people should be talking. So for this letter to be sent to you just before the Jubilee weekend, and it being a complete shock, and for us to have to stagger these meetings back to digest, I think it's a non-ideal situation, and one thing that we absolutely need to look at and possibly address now. And happy to take your comments on this, Mark, as well, is, you know, how closely do you feel like you're able to work with our internal auditors and our directors and our offices? And I mean, this letter almost looks like you know, you guys are running into a burning building, you don't even know it, and we have to shout. But it shouldn't be that. There should be ongoing communications that are two-way. And then that will mitigate some of the things you've said about because we're not knowing about things until we pick them up independently off a risk register. So maybe just a question to you in terms of, do you think there's a serious lack in communication between the different audit functions across the organisation?
Good question, I think. And I think on reflection, you're right. External audit is generally backward looking, reporting things that have happened that people generally know about, or audit results. But clearly this issue for us is systemic governance issues that clearly aren't known everywhere in the authority, or those who have governance responsibilities in the authority, which was one trigger for why we wrote and issued the letter. So there is that transparency. So everybody's on the same playing field, if you like, to understand and move the authority forward if the authority recognises the issues and wishes to move them forward clearly. But we do have good cooperation with officers in the authority. I had good dialogue with them to be able to get to this fact pattern, to be able to issue the letter, and indeed with RSM as internal audit, and that is ongoing. And I know that RSM have been tasked with doing a number of work pieces around this general area that John may wish to elaborate on, which we are liaising with them over.
Thank you. I've been in this role since the inception in the authority 5 years ago, 5 years and a bit. And stability has always been lacking, in the sense of, one looked at the turnovers of finance officers, of the chief executive arrangements, the interim chief executive arrangements. And when one observed, I'm talking now as my personal observations, when I observe the functioning of the combined authority board, it didn't seem to operate as a board of an organisation to which it is accountable. It operated more, I mean, the characters of the chairs changed the dynamic, but I don't think it really changed what was going on. And I really put to you the question as to how does the cultural and the behaviour of a board, which is not a debating chamber, it isn't like a council, it's got clear board type responsibilities as a group. And I have never really seen that. Or equally, I stood back because this is a matter for, there's a political element to all of this as well, but I've taken advice recently as to, are the challenges that I've observed common in other combined authorities, because the same difficulties arise, the political agenda, the policy disagreements, but the need to recognise that a combined authority board is exactly that. It is a board of governance responsible for the organisation. And I haven't seen it evinced here, but I'm told that these tensions exist elsewhere, but they are collectively, the people around the table recognise as an overriding issue. And I ask you to think about that as we go into discussion. And I just like, before I take the next point, take you to page 29 of 50, which is part of the attachments, if your page numbering is the same as mine. Yes, 2950. So it's paragraph 9.2.2. And My reading of that paragraph is that the general machinery of the officers and the service of the organisation is running pretty much as one might expect. And it struck me that the last sentence, rather, the indications are that we face questions about the overall governance and conduct of the authority. It does seem to me that that is a telling line to have in mind. Having drawn that to your attention, could I?
Through you, Chair, can I ask Mark a question, please? He made some quite concerning comments that he said that if the combined authority chose to acknowledge the Ernst Young's comments, then Ernst Young would be in the business of reviewing the combined authority's response to the concerns that they have raised. He went on to say that we would need a number of vehicles, and what was in front of him now did not amount to a comprehensive response. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that the combined authority is making a comprehensive response. So I'd like to put the following questions to him. Firstly, what should a comprehensive response look like? Secondly, what's the number of vehicles that we need? What horsepower and torque and models are these vehicles? I couldn't resist that metaphor, thank you. And what does the journey end look like? Where is the destination and what does the destination look like? And in that overall, if like the journey, the response, the destination, and the vehicles, the last question is, and it relates to para 2.7 of the agenda item number 5, I think it's like the covering report, which sets out the Department of Levelling Up's guidance note of the 6 indicators of poor culture and weak governance. It looks to me actually as if there is a complete read across to the issues that have been identified in this combined authority with those six points. And the question is would it be appropriate for the terms of reference of the improvement board to mirror those 6 bullet points? Thank you.
I'm going to play a card. And the card is that we are the external auditor. We're not the advisor to the authority. And the authority needs to take appropriate advice in responding to our comments. Clearly, the papers have set out some methods of addressing some of the points. But as I said in my earlier answer, I don't think they're a comprehensive package to all the issues that we raised. But there are some encouraging signs, like the appointment of an interim chief executive, for example, dialogue with DLUC colleagues, and clearly the authority will need to have the time and the space to think about the most appropriate way of responding to the vehicles and the appropriate timeline to get to the end, and have a vision of what that end point looks like. But the bullet points in paragraph 2.7, I think the document that DLUC produced, clearly a very good document with some very clear indicators of what good governance looks like. If you can put ticks against those, then clearly some kind of transformation would have happened.
Thank you, Solomon.
Thank you.
I mean, taking Mark's comments of do we take notice of this report or not, I think there is no way we can not take notice of this report. There's a lot of words here, but where is the substance? Where is there any evidence that things are actually happening? And also, I'd ask the question probably of John, has the combined authority got the expertise within it to bring these changes forward to make it compliant?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the leadership capacity, I don't know whether it's an issue for this committee at a future meeting or whether it's a recommendation to the board. But given the obvious importance of that shortage in leadership capacity, what effect is that having on our delivery of projects and value for money? Somebody needs to be looking at that. As I say, I'm not sure whether it's for us or for the board.
Thank you, David. I think that's takes me to the word that's not mentioned its name, which is the words, which is the public of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, of which the combined authority is supposed to be producing improvements. And are we delivering it? So you don't hear in the debate that reminding of that this is what this is about. Could you say something, or whether the acting chief executive on Monday, either you, John, or about capacity and the impact of this hiatus on delivering the things which need to be delivered?
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of points, actually, just going backwards a little bit, and in terms of the 6 indicators of that have been provided in the guidance from DLUC. So what we have done as an officer group is to go through each of those indicators and map those onto the EY report to understand what the concerns that have been raised in that letter, how they apply to those indicators. And we have also given our collective opinion on where we think those issues are and how they relate to the organisation. And we have submitted those to DLUC as an aid to future discussions. And that's been an exercise that has been done both by officers and by constituent council chief executives and by the mayor and his advisors. So that will help, hopefully, to target discussions and to understand where the capacity issues are and where we need additional help from external bodies such as DLUC and others. Obviously, turning to the capacity. Yeah.
Can I just? Isn't it a worry that we don't know? That we didn't need our Platinum Jubilee present to require us to know this? Does the authority not know what it's if there's a mismatch between their intentions and their ability to do it?
Well, I think there has been a number of initiatives which have been taking place since Eileen arrived. So there have been a number of workshops that have been held with constituent authority chief executives and with the board. And as a result of that, we looked at an ambition statement, which included the recognition that the organisation needed to demonstrate collective leadership, and we also had discussion with senior people from DLUC to look at what they expected in terms of the combined authority for them to be able to do business with us. We've also had a comprehensive review of our risk register, which has highlighted a number of these key issues that we obviously need to address and to look at going forward. Well, obviously that would be part of the involvement of the Audit and Governance Committee. I think.
Jody.
Yeah, if I can add as well, is that for those of you who are new, you may not recall, I was brought into the organisation back at the back end of last year to specifically undertake a review of governance at the combined authority, a review I've undertaken at other combined authorities around the country. So the organisation was clearly aware, officer-wise, that there was a need for us to undertake that review and to identify potential barriers or areas that may be affecting the ability to undertake effective decision-making at board and other level, as well as look at things across our governance structure, the foundations, the fundamentals, the culture, behaviours within that structure. And that review, of course, is approaching a point where it will be concluding. And I've previously been to this committee to obviously speak to you about that review and what it involved. And you have asked that I come back once that review is complete to take you through that review's conclusions and findings. In addition, I would add that there are a number of ongoing things that have been going on since I arrived at the organisation to improve governance. There have been improvements in regard to processes and procedures around mayoral decision notes and officer decision notes, constitutional review and improvements. There has been the creation of a chief execs group, combined authority chief execs group, which is a best practice function across all combined authorities, and what I believe will significantly help improve the governance of this organisation. And then obviously in response, since the EY letter, there has been considerable DLUC engagement, as John has set out. Conversations have been held with the scrutiny chair, with A&G chair, about their potential involvement. And of course, the board have had those discussions about the improvement board. We have also been looking at other things, one of which is on the agenda today, which is how we provide some additional clarity and support in regard to our code of conduct and make sure we have a better understanding around member officer requirements for a member officer protocol. So there are definitely things ongoing. And I think we will be approaching that point with the review of governance presented, where there'll be an opportunity to develop an action plan and then respond to that at some pace as well.
Thank you, Jody. Sorry, I didn't know is Councillor Atkins. What's your question name?
Michael.
Mike, right? Yes, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Very many apologies for running slightly late on public transport, and please move on if you feel this has been covered in detail already. I just wanted to sort of explore where in the letter from Ernst & Young it details the concerns in sort of 5 bullet points, so sort of middle of page 21 of our pack. We've been talking a lot, as this is sort of a general acceptance, that there are systemic and deep issues in the authority. When I look at those 5 bullet points, you could, and I'm going to put this stronger than perhaps I believe it to be for the point, sort of to make the point, you could say that these are all fairly narrow, fairly transitory things that have all cropped up in a fairly short space of time. Talking about kind of ongoing issues, probably within, say, the last kind of 12 months that developed. So what is it that either in the view of officers or auditors or this committee that ties these together into a systemic issue? And if there is a systemic issue, why, as the chair has already alluded to, was this not obvious until perhaps these symptoms emerged? And how should we, I feel there's a slight risk that we say, oh, we've spotted some things that are going wrong, and therefore we think there's poor governance. What do we mean by poor governance? Oh, there's these specific things that are going wrong. There's a kind of circularity there that I'm getting a bit kind of trapped in. I don't really understand what we mean by poor governance other than pointing at these kind of short-term things that have cropped up in 12 months. So I don't know if either officers or auditors or the chair, you want to address any of those points.
Do I have a volunteer?
Right. Well, I think that's these are all extremely good questions, and I think that's probably what the improvement board will be if we get to having one of those. If that's the direction that we go in, I think that's exactly what they will be asked to look at. If you look at the, I think it's Appendix 3, it looks at the remit, and part of that will be looking at an initial review and baselining of issues so that we absolutely understand where we are, what the issues are, and that will inform the remit and the activities of the improvement board going forward.
I'll give you my personal view, right, that we've had, this is not in any way to criticize, but this promise that all will be well when we've done this bit of work since year 0. It's not easy to put a new organization from nothing. But what it does require is leadership and a common purpose. And that has always been coming, but we've never had it. We've had a sequence of chief executives, or we even had one which I think publicly I opined against, which was to have 2 chief executives working in tandem. These are not easy things for an organization that needs shaping. So we've had churn, we've never had stability. There's been a lack of clear sense of purpose within the combined authority, which is on the risk register. It's been raised by this committee. And then a proper permanent chief executive was recruited. And I sense, we're remote from the business as members of the Audit Governance Committee, but you can sense how an organisation is behaving. It was beginning to behave like something that you felt was going to be harnessed together. And then we've now lost another, the combined authority has now lost another 6 months or more, whilst we go back to that again. So it's been a very patchy 5 years, never had that clarity of purpose. And what we learnt, because so many of us are new, I'll just recount some of the other things. We had a session with directors last year, sort of horizon scanning one by one, and it was illuminating that you didn't, that the role was changing. It started off as a commissioning authority, here's money, you're in charge of dibbing it out, to you have to bid for money, which is a different skill and behavior pattern, and you have to influence. And I think what's come clear to me in where we're at now is that until and unless the combined authority, and particularly the board, evince a joined upness, that, and the ability to settle disagreements of an issue to something which is coming out with a single voice, it will neither convince London or the constituent councils or whatever other body you have to go to draw money down, that this organisation knows what it's about. And I've seen bits of this, and what my reaction to my Jubilee present was that the clarity that it brought together all these moving parts and concerns which you knew a bit of from an outside voice, suddenly it was transparent, but it has been lost in the hurly-burly of stuff hitherto. Right, that was my, does that help?
I'm sat here bewildered and thinking, how hard can it be, really? Maybe we go back to 2.7, these 6 indicators. I think we need to focus on these points. And it talks about poor culture and weak governance. And we go through those and we see, I mean, I distill the world into psychology and physics. It's a very, very good way of dividing the world. And this is how this works here. There's physics in here and there's psychology. So when we look at this point about collective leadership, well, that's culture. And that collective leadership has got to formulate a vision and a direction, which we do not have. We need collective and united leadership. We need a shared mission. We need the combined authority to be a sound county-wide organisation that the Department of Levelling Up trusts to manage government funds and delivers for the people who the combined authority members were elected to serve. It's very, very straightforward. We've been elected to serve the people who elected us, right? And we've got to deliver for them. So we've got to focus on putting this a combined authority on a proper footing that has confidence, not just with government, but with the public as well. Staffing, the leadership capacity is physics. It's a job that can be done. It's technical, it's procedural, it can be done. Member conduct and member officer relations, culture, all those responsible for bad behavior, sort yourselves out. Be honest about what needs to be done here. You are costing this county and its people millions, which we badly need to support public services in this county. It is the height of irresponsibility to continue to behave in this manner. Governance, it's weak. And we've just heard about work that's been going on, being conducted by the officers, the overlaying of the indicators against the Ernst Young report and how they relate to the combined authority. I think this committee would have liked to have seen that. Comprehensive review of the risk register. I think this committee would like to see that. The governance review and action plan. I think this committee needs to see that. This committee needs to be a lot stronger and better informed. Transparency and public consultation is governance, and HR safeguarding is, again, similar governance weakness. And finally, if a lack of awareness and acceptance to improve is cultural. So these are the issues that we need to be addressing. And this is what we need to be working out today and to give advice back to the board on how to progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Probably a little bit more simplistic question here, really. And if through you, if I may ask Mark, it's, obviously this is doing the rounds all over the place with many different stories being sort of pushed in, different directions that suit different agendas. I guess sort of just for a little bit of clarity for those that we represent, really, just to sort of try and sort of clear it up. There's probably two sides to this question. Is, in your professional experience, the letter reads quite damning, but in the grand scheme of things, in your professional life, how severe is this? I'm obviously not asking for a comparison with X, Y, or Z, but just sort of say, well, it's halfway, it's there, or whatever, But the second part of my question would be and whilst we're in early doors at the moment on what's a reaction, what is happening, what is being put forward. Whilst I completely appreciate you're not here to tell us what to do, but would you consider the reaction at the moment at this early stage is enough? I guess, to use the car analogy, have we put enough gas in the tank?
I'll leave Mark to judge how much of that he could answer.
I'm regretting using that analogy now. Your questions in order. So personally, I think this is a very significant issue, one of the most significant I've had to deal with in my professional career. That's not to say there aren't others, but you can usually count them on the fingers of one hand. So we're in that kind of realm for you. I think in answer to your second question, I think it's twofold. I think clearly there are green shoots one can see as a response, but we're at a very early stage. And moving the analogy is how when you're dealing with culture, that's not just a quick tick. I've put a new system in place. That control has been addressed. Culture is very, as we say in our letter, pervasive. It encompasses everything an authority is doing. Those green shoots are a long way from being able to say that you've addressed everything.
Thank you, Mark. David, did you have another question? Which is next steps. When I think there's some nuggets in here we need to think about. If you go to 2.12, which is about needing external intervention. That looks like on the one hand and on the other, there's a consensus we need external intervention, the CPCA needs it, but it's not unanimity. And then if we go to 2.15, we will need to consider whether making a recommendation to the board on the kind of external intervention, if any, that the board may need to support it in addressing the issues identified in the letter. And when one looks at the intervention board as proposed, as some members have already commented, there is a mismatch between the observations of the external auditor and what in those words of the intervention board map across. Then you look at the constituents proposed for the intervention board, which is, apart from an independent chair, seems to be the same players that got us where we are today. And in I did 10 years in Whitehall. I've serviced a lot of committees. I've seen a lot of decision making. I've seen a lot of, this just bleeds effort running another bureaucracy, and particularly if it's got all the players. And then we've heard the comments about cultural. We'll all have our various experiences, but I know that getting a group of people together to trust each other to run a business in an open way takes a long time. 2 or 3 years, even in small organizations, to get the full bond. Now, politics doesn't allow that because who knows, we'll be here in 2 or 3 years' time. But try to do that in a short time to have change behavior. You require something which my personal view is that an intervention board will get us nowhere near. We've heard it can't be that difficult to just list the things they need to do and they need to get on with it. Well, we have to find an encouraging way, I think, in conveying, or persuasive and encouraging rather than a didactic way, because we are non-executive, we are remote from the business. The how things should be done, I'm always cautious about. Well, sorry, not the how, the what needs to be done, but we can't tell what we have to, in my mind, we have to find a way of holding the mirror up, saying these are the things you've yet not addressed and that we'd like you to address them. We think because of the seriousness, I mean, we're talking about a couple of standard deviations from the norm is how I interpret what Mark says as an external auditor. So how do we turn this into a piece of advice that we can all feel as members that we are supportive of. And I also return to my very earlier point in the meeting that when I asked the Gordon Mitchell yesterday, who's going to sort all this out, especially the cultural behaviour within the Combined Authority Board, because organisations follow their leadership. If the leadership is dissonant, then the whole organisation is dissonant. And he said to me, that's my job, meaning his job, not my job, not me, but him. So that encouraged me that we should have some breathing space, some more breathing space. And if we could distill this debate into one or two things that go along that line, the collective leadership and the like. I'm not sure I can write the words now, but 2 or 3 points that cover that. A request that further consideration be given on. Well, first of all, let's take a simple question. Do we think this organisation will solve it on its own, or does it need external help? And by that, I do not mean the intervention board. Do we have a, David?
It needs help.
Yeah, just I'm probably going to say a little bit more than that. In itself, I think there's a suggestion in here that we should potentially commission an independent report. That's all fine and well, but I think we asked Mark the question and he said, look, I'm telling you there's a problem here. Can't necessarily say what steps you need to take to get to a solution, but we have an internal audit function and they should be able to review any steps that we do take and give us an early view of whether or not they think it will be satisfactory to an external auditor.
Well,
And essentially we need to get them over the line. So I think, personally, I think we should commission an independent review, and then that needs to look at the specific issues. The things
Yeah.
around,
do you mean us? Or
this
or
audit
SAP?
and governance committee should commission an independent review. If we have that in our powers as per our terms of reference, I'm still quite new to this committee, I don't know.
Does anybody else have a comment on that too?
Your mic's not on.
Is that working? Sorry. Do we have the expertise within the combined authority? We've got the same people that have sat and looked out, and they haven't seen the problems that are within the combined authority. It's taken the external auditor to highlight this, which is fine. That's what we pay them for doing. But those same pair of eyes that are looking out are now looking at themselves and they couldn't see the faults before. So do we need to bring a fresh pair of eyes in to look at this? If there's a cultural change, if there certainly needs to be change, or it certainly needs better governance, and it hasn't regulated itself well enough to see what is going wrong, which it should do, then I would say very much that we do need to have external advice or external staff. It would be, Mark would probably be, I know he doesn't give advice, but I'm sure that somewhere there would be somebody's got to break it and say, yes, we need to do something, or there is the expertise within, or we need to bring expertise from outside to put this right, because we're just stumbling along if it hasn't been picked up before it should have been. And this is our opportunity to say, okay, well, it's happened, let's put it behind us, but let's move forward and get it right.
Chair, there wasn't.
And then you.
I recognise that Mark is very circumspect in issuing advice, but he has given us some clues. And one of the best clues was that we've got multiple problems, and there's no one single solution to the multiple problems. We need to work through bespoke responses to each of the problems. We've obviously got the issues that they've raised, cutting across all aspects of the organisation. I think we need to start with, or give serious weight to the culture problem and the fact that there isn't collective leadership. There's not a clear vision and direction that's shared, not just by the mayor, the board, but also all of the leaders of the constituent partners as well. And I think that's what we would call the collective leadership and commitment to making the combined authority work. So there are the internal audit issues to deal with. There's the scrutiny, the public consultation, the HR safeguarding. These all need bespoke specialist interventions to take the authority forward. So it needs quite detailed consideration. But what I'm coming to is, yes, you do need external advice, but you also need to take some responsibility for dealing with the cultural problem as well. And that can be facilitated. But we're going to need expert inputs from right across the piece to make this work. And I think that speaks to Mark's comment about the number of vehicles that we need to use, and that we need a comprehensive response.
I was going to wave really loud, visibly. Do we have internal audit representation on this committee?
Yeah, no, we do. And they're not here today because of the nature of the agenda. And we are able and have, we can direct either external audit or internal audit in any direction that we wish from an audit and governance point of view, not a decision making. So for instance, when the first chief executive left and there was some controversy about what happened, we, the Audit Governance Committee, commissioned the work to establish whether or not the decisions that were taken were proper and in accord with the powers invested in the combined authority. And that transpired to be correct. It was proper. What we didn't discuss, and we mustn't discuss, because it's not our business, is whether it was a good or a bad decision. And that's where overview and scrutiny, amongst others, challenge that, because we are not mandated to go into that area as much as many of us would like to at the time we stumbled across this. But yes, we can. There's also, though, one of my little bon mots is you mustn't keep pulling up the plant to look at the roots, because it'll never grow. So there's also a question of how intrusive we are, as opposed to just saying we want this to be done and and you tell us you're doing it, because it's not for us to tell them how to do it, other than it needs to be done. So it's tricky. Graham, you wanted to say something.
Thanks, John. I've got a few points. Going back to something David said a while ago about what's the impact on delivery, I don't think that's been properly answered. In the paper, it talks about the financial implications. There are none at this point. Well, I don't think that is correct. I think there are potentially financial implications if we don't get the grants that we're wanting to apply for, and if we don't deliver what residents of Cambridgeshire are expecting us to deliver. So that would be one thing. Three other points. It's an improvement board, not an intervention board, just to be clear, is my understanding.
Sorry, okay. No, I was talking about external intervention. Sorry, I probably did use the wrong phrase.
So the next item is terms of reference for an improvement board. So that's what I was thinking of. And one of the reasons for having that is to acknowledge the concerns from government that we are doing something and what we are doing fits in with what they're expecting. So I think that there is justification for doing that. But as Mark said in answer to my original question, this is just taking us on a journey and it doesn't take us all the way there. So I'm tending to agree with the suggestion that we should have management advice, which probably can't come from the audit arm of EY, but could come from the management consultancy arm of EY or RSM or whoever, to make it absolutely clear what else needs to be done to ensure that the authority becomes fit for purpose. The new interim chief executive, presumably at some point, will be replaced by a new substantive chief executive who will have views on all of this, no doubt. And the comment which I think you made about Gordon Mitchell saying the culture or behaviour at the board is something for him, I would have said that that was something for the mayor to be leading and driving, because it ultimately comes from the top. And I thought it was the mayor's responsibility to ensure that things were adequately driven, and things that went on in the mayor's office may or may not have done, and issues around the chief executive leaving, I would have thought came from behaviour at the board led by the chief and led by the mayor. But those are a few of my random thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. We've talked quite a bit about the kind of degree of external involvement. One thing I'd like some clarification on, and I think perhaps we should consider, is if this improvement board is to go ahead, which I think is something we're being asked sort of to comment on directly, in terms of the composition, which is outlined sort of bottom of page 31, top of page 32, it says that the board would comprise 11 members, including a combination of, and then lists an independent chair, board members, authority chief executives, 3 member peers and 3 office peers from the LGA. Now, by my count, that's about 22 people. And so saying, you know, we're going to pick 11 out of 22, well, which 11 could be quite critical. And I don't know if there's been any further thinking since these papers were put together as to what that would look like, but it would seem to me to be quite important, you know, the balance between those different parts on those 11 people. I can sort of give you my feedback from having listened to what debate there was at the Combined Authority Board. That was not the question which they addressed. They wanted paragraph 11. One of the board members, or even 2 maybe, wanted a paragraph removed, 11.4 in the terms of reference for the board. But those issues were not. There was no. The board didn't seem to think it. The board did not debate it in the way that we're debating it, and the conversations were surprisingly short. I still don't think we'll make an impact unless we can boil it down. So can I just go back to this external intervention? Do we have a view as to whether that is, I'm not saying what the intervention could be. It could be external advice, management consultants. They want to keep spending money on them necessarily, or it could be London. Do we think that the combined authority can get its way through this on its own? No.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, you know, are you talking now about being overarching over the whole authority, or do you mean just audit and governance at the moment? And the only reason I say that is because, and again, forgive me, obviously I'm new to the panel anyway, but just picking up on something that Jodie said a little while ago, actually, about, you know, your role, Jodie, coming in. You know, is you know, obviously you only joined tail end of last year, you said. You know, as a panel, do we expect a piece of work from Jodie himself, to sort of, you know, of his findings? You know, because the only reason I asked that was because if it's about audit and governance, before we start looking at externally advice, do we look at what we've got internally first and then make that decision? I think overarching over the whole combined authority is a different thing entirely, and I think, you know, I think there's two separate items.
Yeah, it's a very fair question, and I don't think it is. It's not just for us to say do this, do that, t'other. It's whether, from what we know, given the evidence that we have from external auditors, from what we can read in the papers, from what you can see if you want to go and see on YouTube, the limited debate that took place on the Combined Authority Board, and the point that is made about culture, I think the chief executive interim starting on Monday, I didn't rather interpret that he was going to change the culture, that he was personally going to do it, he was going to make it happen. But it's still, do we think the combined authority on its own can redress the weight of evidence that we've got? And a simple, we don't think you can, would be an impactful piece of advice if members were prepared to go along with that suggestion by me.
I think there's different stages of intervention. I think there's a slide in the pack, isn't there, about different stages of intervention that you could potentially get. And I think that's, again, it's always better for you to volunteer a way out than be imposed a particular set of actions. So your question's absolutely spot on. I think just going back to what I was trying to say earlier, I think I might have been misinterpreted. I think we should definitely get external advice. The external advice should talk to our internal auditors and explain to them what their view is and on what we need to be delivering over a period of 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And then our internal auditors need to create almost a matrix of these are the items that we want to put a green tick against. In order to do that, for each one of them, here's a list of actions we need to complete, and almost give a monthly update to either the chief executive officer or maybe bring it to an audit committee and say, this is our progress against each of those items.
I think that's helpful, because what we can do is invite the internal auditors to come and talk to us in their view of what they can contribute to this from our point of view. But do I take it there's a unanimity about the need for external intervention? This is our advice to the board.
Would it just be easier to take a vote on it?
No,
then you'll be clear.
Propose it then. Would you like?
Yes. Can I propose that we advise the board that it requires external advice?
Second, Mike. Can we go have a vote then, please? Okay, so that's unanimous. It's not. Okay, that's good. That's a clean statement, which we're all on. Then we have the improvement board. And are we minded from the comments I've heard that it is not yet fit for purpose and that we want another look at it by the new interim chief executive? Would somebody like to propose that?
I think that's entirely sensible, Chair, and I would propose it. I had the same questions as Mike raised on the composition of the board. I've got some experience of locally owned improvement boards from my time at the county council, and it needs buy-in. And that's going to come from the interim chief exec to start with. And so we need his view.
So you propose that, and I'll leave that to them. That's the strands of, yeah, okay. Okay, so we have a proposal and a seconder with a bit of context. Can I have a vote in favour? Okay, thank you. For those who are new, I don't normally go to votes because it's not my style, but we're in uncharted territory, and it's important that we do show the unanimity of our thinking. I don't have a vote, by the way, because as an independent person, I'm disenfranchised. This is quite proper, in case anybody picks that up on the recording. Yes.
We've made a very bold resolution about the need for external advice. And on the second point on the improvement board, we've done a little bit of exemplification on the rationale for that, making that resolution. would you consider just revisiting that point about external advice so that we can give a little bit of exemplification? I do hear what you say about this committee not instructing or telling the board what to do, but I think it might be helpful. And I think we've had some really good comments made by this committee today on what the nature and scope of that external advice would be. So if you could just allow me to make a few points just to see whether we can get to a consensus on what that exemplification might be.
Yeah,
I think that would be helpful. I think the first point that was made was that we need, the board needs external advice on what needs to be done to make the organisation fit for purpose, with a degree of process attached to that. So notably liaison with Department of Levelling Up on that, and with the board itself, so that there's a consensus and there's ownership of what needs to be done. So we've identified that as a baseline. The second point that was made was about, I don't know, does internal mean external? An external audit report on the baseline and where the combined authority needs to be. So that's the more detailed work action plan that the board would then have in front of it would come from that source of advice. And the third point about the external advice would be on that important and very difficult matter of cultural change, for which the individuals, you know, the personnel, the mayor, the board, the senior staff, and the constituent and representatives of the constituent authorities all need to be party to. But that does need external facilitation and support, in my view. And as people have commented, it can't be done overnight. It takes a long time to affect cultural change. We have to change the way we do things around here. And I don't know quite where this fits in, but there is the role for the chief executive in rapidly building the senior management leadership capacity of the organization. I think that almost goes without saying, but I think it needs to be said. So I think if we can discuss that bundle and reach consensus on that, I think we've done a good job on this.
Before I ask, could you just unpack your point about internal audit and baselining, because that is a different order to the other things. I mean, we need advice from internal audit. We will ask them to come and give us their assessment, and then we should take it from there. Would be my proposal. If that is that what you meant?
That particular point was one that Imitaz made. So I think he's better placed to explain what he was talking about there.
Yeah, I don't want to be sat in my first meeting and ripping it into an audit function I had no experience of. There's clearly been some failings, but like you say, you can't continually uproot a plant. You have to allow it to let it grow. If we do commission an external report, I absolutely think that we should empower the internal audit function to monitor that plan and to monitor progress towards it and help us achieve our aims.
Sorry, cultural.
The first one was actually picking up Graham's point, which was getting the external advice on what needs to be done to make the organisation fit for purpose, and then go on to establish a consensus with the Department of Levelling Up and with the mayor and the board, the constituent authorities, agree that that's that's the program they're the issues that need to be addressed, and that's the program in which to deliver it. So we're very, very clear on what needs to be done to satisfy the external auditors. And my understanding is that we've got a window until November, when your final audit report comes out, to get the house in order. So that was that point, John. And then the second one was about the cultural change, and that's a different skill set, a different process, and different personnel.
Okay. Now, are we going to be, well, first of all, because there's too many things, we take these one by one. One is external advice on what we need to get the organisation onto a proper footing. Are we signed up to that? Do we need to vote? Yeah.
I think the idea of actually doing a formal vote and demonstrating consensus is a powerful message. If we can do that in this committee.
Okay, so external advice on what needs to be done to put this place right. You're proposing that?
I propose that, yes.
I thought we'd already voted on that.
Well, but this is a granularity level, isn't it? I mean, there's a, and I'm either way. I mean, I'm capable of seeing a letter which you can craft, and in reaching this, these were our concerns.
Yeah.
If we're happy to do it that way,
Yeah.
rather than I've had 38 votes, which I've been
Yeah,
in 5 years, I've only had 3 before today. Yeah.
David's correct. We did vote on it, but we didn't exactly say what.
Okay.
what.
Well, I'll take that, and the cultural change. And I would like to have yours. I'd like to frame this in the cultural change, with something that is our view that until the combined authority board can show people that it is as a collective responsibility and ownership for this organisation, we find it difficult to see how the changes that occurred can be led and carried through. Would those sort of words not cause any discomfort to members? Right. We'll try and do that then. I can see I'm going to have a miserable weekend. Carry on.
Can I propose that then, please, so that we can vote on it?
What, the bit about
what you
the
just
collective leadership and yes, okay.
Yeah,
Can we, yes, propose that? I think that's probably I accept that's a powerful one. Yes. Seconder? No? Yeah. Vote in favour? Unanimous. Okay, good. So we've got, this is where I'd hoped we'd get to, some powerful, simple messages about our concerns, the import of what we're faced with, what the combined authority is faced with, and it's for others to decide how they make that happen. And I'll invite the chief executive to bring us up to date at the next meeting on this whole gamut of issues, and answering bringing us up to speed on things like filling the capacity vacancies and the general health. Okay, are we nearly there? Could I ask you to consider, should we invite DLUC to come and give us their view at our next meeting?
I can see no reason not to.
Okay.
I was going to say the opposite. I was going to say we should try and get our house in order, and not involve DLUC with the absolutely the combined authority board should be talking to DLUC all the time. But I think as an audit and governance committee, do we really need DLUC to inform our views on how well we're doing in this improvement plan?
Do we have a difference of opinion there? Any other?
I tend to side with David in that I don't think it would harm, and it's always good to have somebody working with us and to reassure them that we are taking this seriously as an audit and governance committee, that we've challenged the board to and officers to deliver things, and that they support us in what we're doing. So personally, I don't have a problem with.
But I
inviting
think
them.
you might have even put the idea into my mind in terms of when you said we needed to reach out, and the first person I ever worked for in my life said, "Get your apologies in first." Well, I said there's an element of that in all of this mess we're in, isn't it? Okay, so I will ask that we have invite to DLUC to provide somebody to give us an assessment of their view of the situation and the way forward. Is that fair?
So I don't normally talk this much in meetings, obviously. I think that it's a good idea. And I think the reason for that is that we need to be in a process of trust building. And I think this would be a good exercise towards trust building, showing that we're open, we're transparent, we accept that we've got problems and we're working towards dealing with them.
Okay. If people are going to help me with all of this, if we could, in the letter that goes to the mayor and the CA board, include that point that we will be have invited, nobody can stop us inviting, and that we see this as an important step, not only in understanding, but in trust building. And we need to sort of try and weave that back to the need for the recognition that it's a board and the ownership of the collective leadership. Okay. Have we run into the sand on this then? Thank you very much. And maybe it's too difficult in the political arena, but I would have, when I went to the board meeting earlier this week, I had anticipated some sort of discussion that traipsed over these issues, and it was disappointing. Okay, thank you. We'll move on then. And we will go to the last item on the agenda, which is the member officer protocol. And we've been asked to instruct officers to develop. I'm not sure we instruct, but yes, go on, Jodie.
Thank you, Chair. So in introducing the report, on the 8th of June, board considered a draft protocol that was pulled together following receipt of the EY letter. And that protocol was based on the North of Tyne Combined Authority Member Officer Protocol, which we were recommended as best practice. And the board agreed to follow the principles within that draft protocol and request that this committee then reviews the content of that protocol and makes recommendations back to board on its content. You'll find attached to Appendix 1 the draft protocol that was considered by the board on the 8th of June. And then at Appendix 2, you will find a redrafted version that takes on board some feedback that's been received since that board meeting. There's been engagement with officers through a lunch and learn session attended by combined authority officers very well. And we've also sought some guidance from other board members who weren't at that meeting and from the chair of audit and governance. And the redrafted version is, let's say, more concise and hopefully more focused around some of the behaviours. It also refers to a social media protocol, which is something we've identified as requiring. And one of the recommendations is to ask you to support the production of that protocol. I also draw your attention to 4.3 of the report, which makes reference to the use of personal email accounts by board and committee members. This is an ongoing live issue with the combined authority following incidents of leaking of confidential information. And we are seeking guidance from you as the committee on whether we should look to include this in the protocol as well to make sure we have complete clarity on this matter. So the recommendations put forward are for you to, we're looking for you to agree the content for inclusion in a member officer protocol. Request that the board consider a recommended officer protocol for adoption into the constitution in support of the relevant code of conduct. Instruct officers to develop a social media protocol, and to agree for you to agree to undertake an annual review of the member officer protocols to ensure that it does remain fit for purpose moving forward. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jodie. I know we have one on my left, David Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments and questions. Firstly, just one on as a matter of accuracy, paragraph 1.4 refers to cabinet. I'm not sure where there's a cabinet inside the combined authority. More importantly, as I read it, because this is protocol aimed at, as just been said, both board members and members of committees, reading through on, there's a lack of consistency because on a number of occasions it refers to board members. So does that mean that those bits don't apply to committee members? I think, you know, it needs to be one thing or the other. It needs to be members all the way through. Or if you're really saying this bit only applies to board members, it needs to actually say that, in my opinion. And the other bit, again, it's maybe just me, reference to sort of people going to junior officers for guidance, advice, whatever. There needs to be clarity about where the line is between chief officers and junior officers, because speaking personally, I don't know. Or would any question that I had have to go to Jodie as the interim monitoring officer? If you see what I mean.
Thank you. Yeah, you spotted the fact, like I said, it was hurriedly pulled together based on the North Tyne approach, where they, of course, have a cabinet, not a board. So thank you for that. In regards to board and committee members, correct, we need to refer to members in entirety. So that's the amendment we can make. In regards to junior officers, it refers to obviously going to chief officers. I believe there's a definition in regards to chief officers, which will obviously include tier 1 and tier 2 officers, as well as your statutory officers. And they can obviously then advise and guide on officers that are then best suited to provide that advice.
Chair, can I just come back on that? It might then be useful to circulate an organogram or something with the protocol when it's finalised, so it's clear to people where the cut-off line is.
Thanks, John. A couple of points. One of the things which EY point out is concerns about investigations into key individuals in the mayor's office. And these were political appointments, I gather. So to what extent do those individuals have to follow the code of conduct and this particular member officer code? And secondly, there's a bit of overlap between what officers are allowed to do in this member officer code about not criticising authority decisions. Is that repeated in the ordinary code of conduct, and does that become a bit confusing that there is some overlap with these various things?
Thank you. Just on the last point, that overlap is one of the concerns I have. Obviously, this has been done at a particular speed. I think we need to review the code of conduct within the Constitution and make sure that we cover all those overlaps and make sure everything is very, very consistent. In regards to staff that may be working, obviously, in a mayor's office, I understand we're looking at, there's work underway to look at a restructure of the office of the mayor, but of course they would be bound by the employee code of conduct and therefore subject to the same rules and processes.
Jodie, I wonder if the speed of advance is damaging the strength of the document. And I mean, one of the recommendations is that we ask the Combined Authority Board to agree this and urgently do things at the earliest opportunity. It's an elastic term. Do you feel that you need more time to take on board? I mean, you obviously got your own observations about the way it's been put together at a pace. And there is a danger of trying to advance on every front whilst we're in this unusual circumstance. And we don't want to do this and get it wrong. But what's your opinion?
I suppose I have two sides to that. The first is we obviously made reference to safeguarding of staff earlier in the previous item. We very much feel that this document is needed for that. To provide that clarity on a number of processes at this moment in time. So I feel we need a member officer protocol as soon as we possibly can. In an ideal world, and perhaps this is where your review process can really come into play, I would hope to have a code of conduct properly appendicized to a member officer protocol, to a social media protocol, and properly benchmarked and checked against existing best practice. What we have pulled together is based on best practice. We've taken advice from Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, from 4 other combined authorities on how they pulled theirs together. All of them have directed me to the Norfolk Tyne document. So I'm comfortable that what we have at this moment in time could be adopted and would make a significant difference, but would definitely recommend an ongoing review process, look at how that could be strengthened and better integrated into the code of conduct.
Document adequately cover the social media protocol, or is that going to be a separate document?
So the suggestion is that the social media protocol be a separate element. And so there would be an additional protocol to be developed, specifically in regards to social media, which would cover all types of things from advice and guidance on posting, using different elements of social media, what you can share, about tweeting, retweeting, following, guidance on libel, and specifically on obviously pre-election period as well. All of those things I would imagine you're all quite used to seeing in your own constituent authorities. But it's, I think it's a feeling that would be better explained in a separate protocol and then referred to again, obviously in this protocol and in the wider code of conduct.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. So obviously I'm a substitute member of this committee, so it's a bit rude of me to suggest future work for the committee, but nevertheless, I wonder if perhaps you say this should be reviewed every year, but perhaps in light of your comments, we could, if essentially there's a need for this in terms of kind of staff welfare, then I think that's a strong argument for pushing what we've got through. But nevertheless, I think reviewing every year perhaps doesn't kind of meet either criteria. Perhaps this could be reviewed in more like 6 months alongside the social media policy and the 2 codes of conduct, and it can be a kind of substantive item. Whether you then want to look at it every 12 months after that, that seems quite frequent to me. But I think certainly a review in 6 months to pull all of those pieces together and review it as a package.
People think that's...
Yeah, I just want to add, I think that the 1 or 2 small criticisms of this policy are exactly that. They're just small criticisms. It's obviously a cut and paste job, and you left the word cabinet in there. And again, will help people to identify what you mean by junior officers. I was reading this last night and I was thinking, I've probably interacted directly with a junior officer that I shouldn't have done, possibly. It wasn't anything contentious, but I did think straight away, well, maybe I should have copied in his manager, just as a courtesy and just to give him a bit of background. So I think just reading this, 2 things. Firstly, it's a real shame that we have to have this done on paper. There's nothing in here that is rocket science. This is all just being nice to people and being understanding that you're putting undue pressure on people where you shouldn't have to. And why would you use your professional relationships with people to try and influence personal outcomes? Those kinds of things. It's similar to what we do when we express an interest in any business on the agenda at the start of a meeting. It's that kind of thing. So it's a shame that we need it, but I'm supportive that it's this for staff safeguarding and welfare. I'm supportive that this gets pushed through quickly, with just the note that you probably want to just go through it one more time, give it another look correct a few issues, add a diagram, and I think that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Just a further point on the social media protocol. I just wonder whether it should be a communications protocol rather than only covering social media. Because if I were to go and ring up a journalist after today's meeting, that's just as wicked as tweeting something or putting something on Facebook. So unless it's already covered, I would suggest that this could somehow be widened out.
Good.
I was going to say your interaction with the press that's already covered in the code of conduct, but we can look at the social media protocol, obviously, in best practice and how we can expand that out and relate it to those kind of real life scenarios.
So looking at what we're being asked to do, we agree that the member officer protocol, subject to comments raised by during this discussion, is recommended to the Combined Authority Board, and we ask that the Combined Authority Board adopt it for the Constitution as soon as possible. And we ask the officers to bring back to us a social media protocol for consideration once it's been drafted. And we will review the member officer protocol in 6 months and annually thereafter. Okay, well, we agreed on that. Thank you. Just before I finish this item, I mean, there's best practice. I take the point we shouldn't really need these things, but I think of the two, the lack of a social media one is perhaps more significant because that is slightly more esoteric. But we didn't see this. We've seen the assurance frameworks and governance statements up the gazoo over the years. And it just reminds me that we need to, when we get these documents, it's important to look at what's not there as to what the words of the stuff that's already been written. And I'd like put on the work program for a time to be decided, a lessons learned for us to have, including items like this. At least 6 months away, but we don't want to lose sight that there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the way that we do things, as well as for the Combined Authority. Okay, thank you. I'll close that item then. Our next meeting is the 29th of July. Here, I suspect it might run on a bit. So can we clear our, what do we think, 2 o'clock? 10 till 2? I think if you could have in mind in your diaries 10 till 2. Thank you very much, everybody. And I now close the meeting.